Hello and welcome to a DEMA virtual chapter meeting. Our guest today is Heidi Joline. My name is Natalie Asper-Carnes, your DEMA virtual chapter president, and I'm delighted to be your host today. The fundamental purpose of the Domestic Estate Management Association is to raise industry standards. We are a network of individuals striving to make a difference, interested in better serving and protecting the best interests of our principals and clients. DEMA's virtual chapter provides an arena for all members, regardless of title, time zone, or involvement in a local chapter, to access and participate remotely in a face-to-face environment for learning and networking. We encourage very engaging and relevant industry discussions involving presenters from within our private service professional community, global affiliates, preferred suppliers, placement agencies, educators, and principals, along with occasional guest speakers. Today, we continue our series focused on amazing role models in private service when we look at the role of nannies and newborn care specialists with our guest, Heidi Joline. With 20 years experience specialist, Heidi is well versed in every aspect of Nanydom, whether live-in, multiple sets of twins, or travel, she's done it all, and she's done it well. So without further ado, welcome to DEMA's virtual chapter, Heidi Joline.
Me today. I really appreciate it, and hopefully I can give some people a little bit of insight. I'm sure there are some people who know tons more than me, but I love that Joanne said that she just likes to learn and gain some more knowledge, and that's wonderful. That's what this whole field is about. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right, so let's jump right into it. We've got a whole laundry list of questions for you. First of all, can you describe what a day in the life of first a nanny and then a newborn care specialist might look like?
Yes. It's explaining what a nanny or even a newborn care specialist does is different in every family. Obviously, as a nanny, you're there to care for the child. And that's caring for the child in the whole, whether that's their education, their laundry, their dishes. You're there to make sure that that child is taken care of 100%. And some people don't like it, but you are that pseudo parent. You're that parent that's there when the other parents when they're not available. You're there to love them, nurture them, care for them, and teach them. So every family is different. In general, you normally come in, normally in the morning, right before the parents go to work. Some parents work from home, some parents don't. You help with them getting ready for the morning, whether that's a bottle or breakfast, depending on how old your charge is. You get them ready for their activities, whether it's a play date or a class, or even preschool or school if they're older children that you take care of. You take them to the activities, you help them socialize at these activities, and then at night you can feed them dinner, you can bathe them, and for some people you can even put them to bed, depending on their parents' work schedule. So every family is different, so there's not a general norm of what you do, but I say you take care of that child 100%, with the parents, of course. As an NCS, and I will say this, like I have the NCS training. I've done a few NCS positions, mostly temporary, whether to help out other NCSs, working on the weekends while they work the weekdays, and taking care of the infant on the weekends so they actually get some time off. It's basically to help the parents learn how to manage a child, manage this newborn that a lot of times they don't know what to do. And you're there to help to set that routine, to set the most current guidelines and regulations to help the parents strive and become the best that they can be. And that's what I do when I go in just to do temporary NCS work. But there are wonderful, amazing, elite NCSs out there, Tanya being one of them from Newborn Care Solutions, and they probably have this long list of wonderful things for newborn care specialists, when I go in and do newborn care specialist on a temporary basis, I go in to help the parents, and I'm sure they do too. I go in and make sure that I follow their routine and then help set up a routine that could be even better per se. So yeah, but everyone's different. Every family's different. Every home is different. Every child is different. Every parent's different. So every nanny, every NCS job is going to be different in some way.
Of course, of course. So speaking of differences, what are some of the differences within the child care roles themselves once they're out of that newborn stage?
Yes, once they're out of the newborn stage and we, moving on from newborn care specialist, there are multiple, and obviously people know there's like the babysitting, there's the au pair, and then there's multiple different levels of being a nanny. A babysitter is someone who, we all know what that is. I'm sure a lot of us did it maybe when we were younger, or, even now there are actually nannies who still babysit. I do sometimes currently, especially if a past family needs me to babysit. But a babysitter is more on an occasional timeline versus a daily lifetime. And a babysitter there's no higher expectations. You are there to care for that child or children at the time, and that's it. Versus then there's the au pair. And I actually looked up more about au pair. I have not been an au pair, but an au pair is someone who's from a foreign country, and they are living with and being part of a host family. And there are different laws depending on where an au pair is living at the time with their host family. I looked up for the United States some of the regulations, and they change. Like there are some laws that went in effect in like 1980 and 1990, that help with the au pairs. And an au pair for the United States, and I have to read this, they usually live in the United States. They're living and studying in the United States for 1 to 2 years in exchange for providing up to 45 hours of childcare per week. And now that's limited. They can only work so many hours per day as well. And then they have to have so much time off. And au pairs in the United States are required to complete educational components as well. So then they are given a monetary, an allowance, which has to go with the guidelines of the minimum wage. And so depending on the country that you're in, au pairs vary, and usually au pairs are younger and morely women. There are men, obviously, but it's mostly women, and it's the late teens, early 20s who are going to be au pairs. So that's another realm of childcare. And then there's the nanny, and there are multiple levels of nannies. There's the nanny who is doing it because they need the extra work, say they're in college, and they need some type of flexibility, which the nanny world does have in flexibility for the most part. Then there's the career and the professional nannies, and some people can be career and professional nannies at the same time. They can go hand in hand, and those are the nannies that are striving to take those extra classes. They are the ones that are going to continue their education. They're the ones that are going to continue to follow up on the guidelines and the regulations that are always changing. They are changing every year, depending on where you live. On the state, car seat regulations change all the time. Nutrition guidelines change all the time. And those career and professional nannies are the ones that are going to be continuing to keep on those regulations, depending on where they live. And the career nannies also are going to be the ones they're going to retire from this, hopefully. And this will be their job. They are the ones that say, yes, I am a nanny, and this is my career. So those multiple levels. And a professional nanny also is going to be someone that's going to take a position, and they're going to mold to what they need to be. They're going to, like I said, take that education, but they're also going to mold for any situation, any family that they're working for, because they've done this for a long time, and they understand how to meld with that family in a more professional manner. So, and those are there's a few more, obviously level, different things, but those are the three main, that work in this private childcare sector, obviously.
Sure. What are the main priorities that nannies focus on when working with children?
Hmm. I think it depends on the age of the child, but the main priorities obviously is you want to focus on social, you want to focus on emotional, you want to focus on physical, nutrition, but there, it's hard, it's hard to explain to every child. You're gearing these children to become people in life, and so you want to have them grow up as best as they can in the world that they're living. And so you're helping create that next generation. So.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the 4 C's in creating a diamond level work environment. What are those?
All right. Oh, we'll skip over the other. I had the other one. So the 4 C's, it's really important, and they all kind of go hand in hand with each other. And without one, it doesn't really work. Your position can work for a little while, but it's not going to fully work. The 4 C's are going to be contract, compatibility, communication, and consistency. You have to have all 4 of those things. If you're missing one of those, somewhere you're going to falter. If you don't have a contract, the other 3 are not going to work, because the communication's not going to work. The consistency is not going to work. If you don't have that open communication, the other ones are going to fall as well. So you have to have all 4 of those in order to have a healthy work environment. And I can go more into that if you want.
Absolutely.
Okay. So a contract in any position. And there was a great saying, Laura Brawley, who is well known in the nanny world. She came and did our International Nanny Training Day, and she gave a great saying and said, with a contract, you have an anchor, a base to start. Without a contract, you're just floating around, which really it's true. With a very detailed, well-written, thorough contract, you can go back to your employer and say, but this is in my contract, so why is this happening? You have a footing, you have a base to stand on. Without that contract, you can't say, well, I thought I was getting these holidays off. I'm sorry, they're not in your they should be well written and thorough and detailed. Everyone should have a contract. There's wonderful contracts out there, again, that Laura Brawley has put out, and it's called the A to Z contract, and it works with a lot of different nanny realms, part-time, full-time, all that. And it helps, it's very, very thorough, and it helps the nanny also, because a lot of times it's hard for nannies to speak up and say, this is what I want. It's really hard. And I'm sure in a lot of positions where you're in a home, it's really, you're speaking for yourself, but you're not in an office. And so there's no HR, a lot of times there's not that guidelines that they're always there. Like, everyone is working, everyone's doing this, and you're in a home as a nanny, and your only other coworkers, your child that you're taking care of. So having that contract to fall back on and say, I'm sorry, I was supposed to get Memorial Day off. I was supposed to get 2 weeks paid vacation. Those things, if you don't have them, it's not going to work. As far as compatibility, we're all going to have our differences. Everyone in life is going to have their differences. But if you're going to take a position where not only your parenting style is working, but if you're compatible with the parents as well. If the parents that you work for only want one type of parenting skill and that's not your parenting skill, then it's not going to work, because as a child gets older, you're going to not meet eye to eye at all. If you're taking a job knowing that it's free range and you don't like free range parenting, obviously it's not going to work as the child gets older. And then if the parents are really into, say, sports, and they like camping and hiking, and that's something you don't like at all, that's probably not a good position for you. Even though you're not going to say, take the child camping, for a week on your own, you need to help bring that outside world in with the child, just something like what the parents would do. And so you probably wouldn't, if you're more wanting to stay inside, then it's not going to work. Those parents are more out, they want to play the sports, and you're like, I don't know how to play. It's not going to work. So you need to be compatible with the parenting style, with their lifestyles, and with their home styles, because some parents like TV, some parents don't like TV, some parents like this type of discipline, some parents don't like that type of discipline. So being a professional nanny, you can, like I said, mold towards certain lifestyles, but in the end, a lot of them, you can't fully mold yourself to everything. The other one is communication. You should always have open communication. You should find time with your bosses. I know you call them principals, but you should find time to sit down, whether it's once a week, once a month, once every month, or a quarter, and have an open communication of what's working and what's not working. Because it's a very personal job for you, as well as the parents. You're taking care of one of their most precious things in life. This is their most precious being that you've ever taken care of. And there should be open communication back and forth. If the parents are not liking something that you are doing, they should be able to tell you. And if they're doing something that you're not liking, you should be able to voice your opinion. And they may say, we're not going to do that. And that's fine, but you're voicing your opinion, and maybe you can help them understand different educational or guidelines or regulations on why. Like if a parent wants to turn a child around at the age of 1, rear facing to forward facing, and in your state, the law says it's 1 year old, as a nanny, you can go and say, well, here's research from American Pediatrics and other places on why you should leave your child rear facing longer. They may not take it, but you're voicing what you know because of your education and your research, and you're helping parents then also educate themselves, because a lot of times these are first-time parents, or these are parents maybe that haven't had another child in a few years, and those guidelines change all the time. The last one is consistency, and that's kind of a weird one, because why should consistency in the workplace? There should always be consistency in the workplace, but a consistency in a behavioral aspect is more on checking in on each other. And again, that's the communication. So you should have that consistency on checking in and making sure that the needs of each other in this relationship is met. So you should be making sure that the needs of your child that you're taking care of and the bosses are met within reason, as well as they should be doing the same thing with you. Because if your needs aren't met, it's not a workplace that you want to be in as an employee, but the same thing goes in line for the parents. And again, these all go in hand. So you have to have all of them, or else there's going to be resentment. There's going to be quarrels that, they're not like, obviously fighting quarrels with your boss, but like, you're just not going to be happy in your workplace, and you're going to be wanting to change your position more often than staying. And you want that longevity. Unfortunately, in the nanny world, a lot of times longevity is not that long. It's a few years. There are, jobs where you can get 6 years, 10 years, but a lot of times every few years, you're looking for a new job, whether those kids go to school, or they move away, so you want that, you want to have all four in order to make everyone in the job working well for each other. So those are the 4 C's that I use.
All right. How do you help principals define realistic expectations?
That is a good one. That's a very good one. And again, that goes back to the contract. That goes back to the open communication. That goes back to the contract. If you're working with an agency, it's definitely a lot better, because those agencies can set those guidelines ahead of time versus working on your own. And I've done it. I've gone both ways, where I've taken positions without an agency, and I've taken positions with an agency. And I will say it's a lot easier with an agency, because they do all that legwork for you. They do all that gut work that a lot of times you don't want to do. You don't want to go in there and say, I want this type of pay and I want this, and we should be able to do that. But a lot of times, and if I'm in a lot of nanny boards and everything like that, you see a lot of people who are like, I really don't want to confront anyone. I'm really bad with confrontation. So you should, it's easier with an agency. I remember not recently, but a few years back, I was doing an interview, and it was multiple interviews for one family, and I was not going through an agency at that, for that position. And it was really difficult because this family, being a little more high net worth, high profile, things like that, I would go in and I would feel very like, okay, I'll just go in and what do you like? We never talked about money, we never talked about anything. And I did multiple interviews with them. And, I ended up not taking the position because, we could never agree on hours and days and things like that. And in a way, I feel like that would have been a lot easier if an agency had stepped in and taken on all that grunt work beforehand. But in the interview, you definitely, whether it's agency, word of mouth, or you found them on an online site, in the interview, you definitely have to set certain expectations. And obviously, if it's a new parent, they have no clue. If I'm sitting there saying, I like to not have, TV time and, take them on outings, obviously the parents will be like, yeah, we love that. But as soon as the kid becomes a toddler, they're going to change. They might change their parenting style because they didn't know when they had this little baby. And then again, that's that open communication. So you have to set those realistic goals from moment one in the interview, especially if they're not coming from an agency, because then it's all on you. Hopefully the agency is setting those expectations realistically with them and saying that nannies deserve, and anyone who works at home, but nannies deserve overtime. Nannies deserve to be taxed like legal employees, because you are. Nannies deserve the holidays and the time off and the sick time and anything else that's needed, mileage. Hopefully all those things are, and those things are sometimes hard to bring up, especially in an interview, because you're just interviewing and you're trying to put your best self forward. And you don't want to be like, well, here I am, I'm the best person for you, but this is my list of expectations and I expect it right now. Hopefully you can bring those in a nice roundabout way, and definitely don't sign a contract until everything is exactly how you want it. If it's not exactly how you want it, then there will be resentment later. And fix it for how you want it, because the only best advocate for you is yourself. And there's no reason for you to sign something and be like, well, they said I could get 2 weeks. They're only giving me a week. Okay, I'll still sign it because this sounds like a great job. If you can live with only having a week off, great. But if down the road in 6 months or a year, you're like, wow, this stinks. I only get a week off. This is awful. And then that resentment builds, and it's not going to be that happy work environment, because again, that communication, that contract is not complete. That's not complete. It's not complete for how you wanted it. And that might keep you from finding a position right away, because you might not find something that is perfect in what you want. But you need to set your realistic expectations, and the parents need to set their realistic expectations, and hopefully they meet in the middle as much as possible. I mean, I would love to have 6 months off out of the year, but it's never going to work. So obviously I'm never going to find a contract with that in it. But, if I go in and say, I like to travel and I'd like X amount of time off, then obviously, hopefully I can find a position like that. It's again, that open communication, and it should start from the interview, because they're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them. You're interviewing the people that you're going to work for. You're interviewing their home. You're interviewing their lifestyle. You're interviewing everything about them. I go into a home during an interview and I see how the parents raise pets, because that also is an indicator of how they're going to, and this is awful to say, but how they're going to raise their children is how they deal with their pets as well. I look at how they furnish their home, not money-wise, but how they furnish their home. How do they decorate it? How is it a collaboration between the husband and wife? How do they, when I interview, I go in and, how do they interact with each other? And my interview on them is more personal, and it's in my head versus they're asking me questions. Obviously, I'm going to ask them questions. But my interview process is a lot in my head. Like, I know when I go into a family, if I feel it, by the end, I know that they'll be a good family to work for. But you have to set those realistic expectations. You have to set them from day one. You have to set them in the contract that in the interview, but then after the interview and the contracts are going back and forth, that's when you need to put those in there. You need to put in what you need. And again, it has to be thorough. It has to be spelled out, because if you just put holidays in your contract, my holidays are different than your holidays or what they want. Their holidays might just be Christmas and New Year's, or Christmas and Thanksgiving, or whatever. And I may want different holidays, if your expectations are a certain rate of pay, you need to bring that. You should not be going to those interviews where they're like, okay, we're going to pay you $10 an hour. You should know that beforehand. And don't take, if you don't want $10 an hour, don't go on that interview, because they're never going to meet what you want, and everyone will be unhappy in the end. So definitely open communication from the day one, and help set those expectations from day one in the interview. Hopefully an agency helps set those expectations, but if not, then do them on your own. Do it on your own, and you have to be your best advocate for yourself. Sorry, I babble.
Nope, it's fine. I have to agree with the agencies. I saw very early in my career, more than 20 years ago, that my peers who were accepting positions without an agency involved were utterly miserable in their positions, and they were at the mercy of whatever the family's whims were that day, week, or month. I mean, it just didn't jive with any sort of professionalism whatsoever. And having an agency involved, not only on the front end, like you mentioned, but also throughout your tenure there, has been priceless, because things have come up with the family, and I call up my agent and say, I feel something coming, I don't know what it is, or X, Y, and Z happened. Am I is it okay that I don't like this, or that I'm angry about it, or that I'm frustrated? And they're like, absolutely, no, that shouldn't happen. And, and they actually call the family and do a check-in and say, hey, how are things going? What's new? And I hear you have da 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 da. And, you've had 2 kids since we last talked, and she hasn't gotten a raise, or, things like that. So, when at all possible, I would not take a position without an agency involved. And it has happened where I've found the job that I want, and there's not an agency involved from their end. And so I contract an agency to say, all right, will you at least help me on my end? And a few of them have been willing to do that.
Yeah. I mean, that's, it's great that agencies check in. I mean, if you have a great rapport with agencies, hopefully they're checking in, especially after you started with them, with, that they, because there's that baby raise, there's other raise, some, if, you've been there for a certain number of years, obviously, you should be getting these certain raises. And so, and again, money is a very hard thing to talk about, no matter what field you're in. Money is very hard to talk about. And if you're in a field like this, you don't have that, that boss to go to, who then goes to another boss, who then goes to another boss. And it's like in a manual, again, like a contract, it's in a manual that after, you're such a time, you're going to get such a percentage of a raise. These are very personal. You are in someone's home. Right. This is very, very personal. This is very, you're learning things, and you're learning things about them, and they're learning things about you that normally would not probably be shared in certain workplaces. And so it does get very personal. So having that agency, and I've done, like I said, I've done positions without agencies, and then I've done positions with agencies. And since moving to LA, 10 years ago, I would highly suggest working with an agency, especially out here. My first position was not with an agency, but I still love those people dearly. I still see them all the time. Almost every day after our 20 years. But no, it was not with an agency, and it was definitely pre social media. So the only other people that you would talk to, if there were other nannies in the neighborhood, and if there were not, you didn't know anything. Like I had no clue. And you kind of fell into it like any job. A lot of times you fall into it, and I fell into it. And now I know certain laws and I'm still learning, every day, but the certain things of, you should have that contract. You should have that, you need to be paid legally. All those things that fall into place, like with any other job out there, that they should work here in a in-home position as well. Right. And unfortunately it's not checked as much, obviously the IRS checks on certain things, but it's not checked as much because it's a personal home. And a lot of people, if you go to a parent, they're like, oh, my financial person says, no, you're going to be a contractor. No, not as a nanny. You should not be, as a nanny, should not be a contractor. You should not be, paying on a 1099, Right. And so a lot of times financial planners don't know as well. And so and that's where you go in and you help educate those parents. You can turn them to the IRS laws, which sometimes are hard to explain. I read them and stop reading because, a lot of times they're not, the wording is off in certain things and it kind of gets a little boring. But there are multiple payroll agencies out there that actually help nannies and help parents out there. Homework Solutions, Nanny Paychecks, there's certain things out there, I can't think of all of them at the top of my head, but they help the parents and guide the parents, just like you're helping guide the parents and educating and growing the child. These places are helping grow the, helping the parents learn and educate on the taxes and the laws on certain things that just, a lot of times that aren't out there. They're not put out there for everyone to know. So, just shake my whole table. Yeah.
All right. So what are the benefits and challenges to living in or living out?
That's a good question. That's a great question. My first job was actually as a live-in. And like I said, my first job, I had no clue about nannying. So I just took the job and said, okay. And I didn't have that contract. So I did I think with the nanny, with a live out, you definitely have a little bit more, for my personal self, you definitely have a little more freedom because you're leaving at the end of the day. It's kind of like if you worked in an office and then you went to the next cubicle and that's where you slept. And then you got up in the morning and then you went back to your desk. There's no separation. And that becomes really, that becomes even more personal. And that's when your contract should really, really, when you're a live-in, that's when your contract should really, really be spelled out really thoroughly. Like it should be a nice, long, detailed contract. Because if you're living in, and if you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50, whatever it is, and say you want a guest to sleep over, how does that happen? What if it's your family who are in town? Do they get a hotel room? What if you start dating someone? What are your expectations if you're a live-in and the kids are crying and you're not supposed to be working? Because as a live-in, you still should have hours. You still should be paid at that hourly rate. Just because you're a live-in, it doesn't mean you're 24/7. Some people think, oh, I have a live-in. Okay, I don't have to get up in the middle of the night. No, you should still be getting that those hours and that certain pay. You shouldn't really take a pay cut for being a live-in because you're still doing your job. And you still should get minimum wage. Just because you're living in doesn't mean you get, $4 an hour because they're providing you with a room and you're sharing a bathroom with 3 children. And yes, they're providing your meals or their internet or the car or whatever, but this is still your job. They're not doing you a favor by you living in, because it's a job, and it's a job for you, and it's a position, and they need to realize that it's an employer and an employee. So a live-in can go good on both sides, because one, a nanny is then saving money, because they don't, especially if you live in an expensive area, that nanny doesn't have to rent a place. Here in LA, the rents are crazy, as well as other places, New York, San Francisco, Miami, Seattle, things like that. So finding a position where you can have that burden of paying rent, is helpful. But if you're I'm in my 40s, there are times where it's like, do I want to be a live-in, or do I want to save rent? And again, if I was to become a live-in, which I'm not saying I wouldn't again, but if I was to become a live-in again, I would have to have a very detailed contract. I would have to have that contract spelled out. What are my hours? What are my expectations? What are your expectations? What am I going to give Tim? Like if I'm off the clock and I'm making breakfast, and the kid is downstairs and hungry, obviously I'm going to make them breakfast. Do I expect to be paid for it? No. It's that boundaries. You have to set those boundaries when you're a live-in. And that's really tough, because then it's even more personal, because you're seeing each other in these times, whether you're in your bathrobe, making breakfast in the morning, or, you want a late night snack and so does one of the parents. It's like, oops, it's that personal boundaries that when you're a live out, it's really hard. Imagine working in an office setting. And I always bring that back, because it's like an office setting is something that's a little different. Like if you're in an office setting, you're the CEO and you are living in there, and you have to see the CEO at night, doing whatever he or she does nightly, and now you're doing it as well. It's very hard to cross those boundaries when you're a live-in, and so you have to set those expectations high in the beginning. A live out definitely has a lot more, I guess, would say freedom. You're leaving your job at night. You're literally like any other job. You're going home and hopefully forgetting about the day until tomorrow. I go back into my job. I can go home. If I want to, on the way home, I want to stop off and go meet with some friends, or if I want to go shopping, or if I just want to go home and eat ice cream on the couch in my pajamas, nobody's going to judge me. But if I'm a live-in, sometimes it's a little more difficult. The being a live-in versus a live out, they both have their pros and cons for what they are. And some people truly love being a live-in, and some people truly love being a live out. And it's just like some nannies love working for stay-at-home parents, and some nannies, the majority of nannies, love working for parents who do not work from home. I've never had that. I've always had parents who work from home in some, capacity. But it's really what you want and what you like. And again, this goes back to compatibility, communication. It goes back to those 4 C's, because if you're not compatible, a live-in job is definitely not going to work. It's not going to work as a live out, but it's definitely not going to work as a live-in, because you're there 24/7. So set those goals, again, from the beginning, if you're a live-in or a live out, and they both have their benefits, and they both have their, for lack of a better word, non-benefits. It's like they both just, it's what you prefer. Some people prefer, and I know years and years ago, everyone was a live-in. If you look back in time in the 1800s, there was a live-in. That was it. You were a live-in and you lived there, as well as the other staff, and you took care of the family 24/7. But we've moved on from that, and so you have to set those things on what you want and what you like. And if you like being a live-in, then find those families that will meet your needs completely before taking a position just because you need it.
Absolutely. How do you know when it's time to move on and search for a new position?
That is always, for me, I know when it's time to move on, when there's a little bit of resentment, when there's that little bit of like, you feel it in your heart and it's that resentment, and it's like, you're like, oh, they did that the other day. It's just that little bit of resentment, and you know you're not going to get past it. No matter the amount of open communication that you have, it's that little bit that's just eating at you. And you really, that's when you should probably start to consider to move on. I know a lot of nannies, and myself included, you know, it's a hard thing. You know, you fall in love with these families, you fall in love with these children, and thinking that you may never see them again after working with them for years, you know, that eats at your heart. It's heartbreaking. If you don't feel that heartbreak, you know, it's, you know, why do you, this little child that you've taken care of from sometimes day one or day, you know, whatever day, however old they are, you know, that child has imprinted on your heart and your soul, and that family has as well. But if you stay and know that there is that resentment, it's going to grow and it's going to fester and it's going to become a bigger obsession. It's going to be every little thing that you're going to think of is going to go back to that, whatever that resentment was. And you're going to always think about it, even if you say you're not going to. So probably about the time that you start having doubts is when you should move on. And not saying that, oh, I doubt this right now. You know, something happened, I need to go. I mean, try and work through it. Try and do what you can. But if things build on it, obviously don't stay just because you love the children. I mean, that's like a toxic environment. That's like if you're having, you know, if it's a husband and wife and there's a toxic environment, obviously you try and work it out. But again, this is a job. It's a position. You're not the parent. They're the parents. And yet you should move on before that anger, that resentment, that frustration grows to something that is unhealthy. I had a prior position where I knew, and I love them dearly, and I love them to this day, but I knew that our parenting styles were not melding anymore as the children grew into toddlers and young children. And I tried and like, okay, you know, we'll do it this way and this way, because obviously you're the parents, and I would talk to them about how things would go. But we were on two different paths. And I knew at that point, it was time to go, because we did not, again, that compatibility, we were not compatible anymore. When the children were younger, you know, when the baby was an infant, obviously we were on the same page. Keep the baby alive, feed it, you know, love it, you know, take care of it, diaper it, you know, and get the baby on a great schedule. But as the child grows and they're, you know, the parent wants to do this way and you want to do something the other way, obviously the parent wins because they're the parent, and you want to try and educate them on maybe a slightly different way. But if it's not meeting in the middle, then obviously it's not going to work. And as the child grows even more, it's going to separate even more. And that's when you should, you know, I mean, personally, that's what when I know it's time to move on. And if you don't feel valued for who you are, you should probably consider moving on. Yeah, you know, hopefully as a professional nanny or a career nanny, you're being hired for your education. You're being hired for who you are and what you know. You're there to not only raise a child, but you're also there to help, for lack of a better word, raise the parents. You're there giving them information and education that they may not know. You're there to help guide them to helping their child to achieve their greatness. And if you're not feeling valued for what you're worth, then it's probably time to move on. Yeah.
Absolutely. I always used to say, I never want molehills to become mountains. I want to address every molehill as it appears.
It's true. I used to say snowballs, like to a child like 20 years ago when I worked for, like it would grow into a snowball. It started out this little, you know, because she would get angry or whatever, and it would grow and grow and grow, and now this snowball is so big, it's rolling down the mountain, and there's no way to stop it. And she's like, "Yeah, I can't stop this anger," you know. And it's like that little thing, no matter what it is, it's gonna grow. And so even no matter how much open communication, sometimes it doesn't work out. And that's when you should move on.
Sure.
Hopefully.
Yep. All right. So what do you wish you knew then?
I wish I knew a lot. I wish I knew a lot. Like I said, I mean, when I started nannying many years ago, I knew nothing. I came from a preschool background, and I got my position because the family needed another nanny. And I knew the other nanny from a friend of a friend, and she's like, come work with us. And I was like, oh, okay. And I knew nothing. I still lived with my parents at the time. I was young, very, very young 20s, very, very, very young. Maybe 20. Yeah, somewhere in there. Ooh, aging myself. And I knew nothing. I moved in with them, and there I just went. And I wish that I wish I knew what I know now about the taxes, the laws, the contracts, the open communication, the boundaries. But in a sense, sometimes I wish I'm glad I didn't, because I became the person that I am because of the path that I chose and the things that I did. And if I knew those things back then I wouldn't be the person I am right now. And I wouldn't have met the people that I have cared for, or that the parents that I have met. I always wish I had gone to like the Norland Nanny College in Bath, England, and I wish I could still do that. I'm older now, and they wouldn't take me. It'd be multiple years. It'd be like 50 by the time I get out. But I wish I would have done that when I was younger. But then I always say, but I wouldn't have gone on the path that I would have now. I wouldn't have met the family that I did 20 years ago, and I wouldn't know their children, and I was with them for 6 years, and as a live-in for 6 years. And I wouldn't have been able to watch their children grow. And like I said, I still have a very strong relationship with them after all these years, and I wouldn't know them, and it wouldn't have set me on the same path. I obviously, it would have been a different path, and maybe it would have been a great path, but I enjoy the person I am now. And I think we can only take where we started and what we know now and just grow from it. There's, just grow, continue to grow, hopefully, and just continue to learn. That's it.
All right. Well, speaking of education and Bath, what sort of educational options are there for nannies and then newborn care specialists?
There are multiple ones, and they're growing day by day. There's definitely a lot more. I think the social media aspect has definitely helped open a lot of those doors versus pre-social media, or even internet for but there are many. There's newborn care solutions, which is out there, which is an amazing if you want to do take the newborn care route. And they have I think there's just the regular level, and then they have the advanced, and then they have the elite, and multiple other places have that as well. Other newborn care sites have those as well. A lot of them do online now, so you can take the classes online, which is nice. There are I take a lot of online classes because it's easier for me than going in. I pay for them, but it's not like I'm getting the full degree on it. And there are great sites out there that I use, like Coursera and Udemy, because I can go in and I can take a child psychology class from a university like University of Edinburgh. I can take their class, I can pay for it, and then get a certificate of completion. It's not that I'm becoming a child psychologist, but I can take that certificate of completion and put it on my resume. I can take a sleep training course from multiple different sleep trainers that are available out there and put that in my resume. So obviously I want to gear my resume towards more on the educational side, on the parenting side, on the children's side. And so I look for those classes. I recently took an infant and toddler massage class here in LA. And that helps. There was a lot of doulas in the class, as well as nannies. And I'm one of the, I believe that the touch and the massaging and everything is very important, not only to show the parents, but then for the child as well. So I enjoyed that class. And then I took Respectful Childcare from, again, Newborn Care Solutions with Danielle, and that was an amazing class online. but you just have to be willing to do it. I think I have like 8 classes out there that I'm still waiting to take, but I try and do a few a year, just to, excuse me, just to stay current with what's going on. And there's multiple ways out there. There's if you're in a lot of the nanny groups, a lot of people know you can go out there and say, I'm looking to boost up my resume. What should I take? And people will list car seat training classes, safety classes, newborn care specialist classes. People will list those. And that's the good thing about being in the time that we are now, is that there is a plethora of education out there. It's just you being willing to do it. And yes, sometimes you do have to spend that money. You have to spend that money to take those classes. And some of them are a little more pricier, especially if you have to travel and put yourself in a hotel. The INA, which is the International Nanny Association, also has their credentialed nanny exam, as well as now a credentialed newborn care specialist. So you can become a credentialed nanny or newborn care specialist and put that on your resume. You can go to trainings like INA. DIMA has one as well, but INA also has one where you can go to the conferences every year and hear great speakers. That helps people just be like, you're right, I need to do more, and go out there and learn some more. There's, littler ones like Nanny Palooza. There's International Nanny Training Day, which is all over the world on the same day, which is an amazing thing because a lot of them are put together by nannies locally all over the world. I know here in LA, we put ours on every year, and it's just a group of nannies in our area. And so we take our time after work and we, text each other and chat, and we try and set up, and we, a lot of times it's out of our own pockets to help set up these trainings once a year. There's Nanny Palooza, which you can go to and hear some great speakers and learn some great topics. So there's always something out there. It just depends on what you're willing to do and what you're willing to spend. Obviously, some of those classes are a little more expensive, like I said, and you just budget that in there. And if you can do it, great, but that doesn't make you it doesn't make you less of a person. You still have that heart and that drive, and you do what you can do. Obviously, you want to have a top-notch resume, so you should try and take as many classes as you can to continue your education. Oh, Natalie, you're on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Well, let's take a few questions from our audience here. Okay. Outside of education options, what are some of the changes that you have seen in the nanny industry over your tenure?
So much. I mean, I've seen a change in just the past few years. I mean, car seat safety is definitely one of them. The car seat industry has changed so much. If you even look at myself, I don't think, I was bouncing around the back of a truck when I was little, fighting over who's going to ride on the wheel hub, which is, I would be mortified if I had a kid that did that now. Car seat safety is a big hot topic right now, because they're learning, that rear facing is better longer. And so then the car seats are getting, the weight limits are getting heavier, so that way they can accommodate to children sitting backwards. But then the laws are not following those guidelines of safety yet. A lot of states and countries, it's 1 or younger to turn them around forward facing. And obviously it's a parent's choice. You should go by your state laws as well as the guidelines of, the car seat manufacturer as well. Other areas that they've changed: nutrition, screen time. That's a big one now because screens have become so prevalent in our world, and screen time is anything. A screen time could be a cell phone. It's not just a TV. A lot of people think oh, I don't let my kid watch TV as the child's holding their cell phone. That's also screen time. They're learning, that it is affecting the child's brain and development. Morely for the negative, obviously there is the positive there because, the language or whatever, but you can get language from just speaking to a child. I love TV myself, but I'm not pro TV for a child or screen time. Obviously it's there. It's something that the child needs to know about, but it doesn't need to be there early. So that's something that's changed, especially in the past few years, is screen time, because they're just there. You know, we haven't had these mobile devices that are just so easy to have. So that's a big one, is screen time has changed. But a lot of things have changed. You know, nutrition, getting your child out more is really hard. And I think that goes hand in hand with screen time, because we're very, nowadays we're more indoors safety wise because of, you know, wherever you live, or if there's a safety issue of letting our children just play outside. That's changed over the past few years, you know, I wouldn't say past few years, but obviously, you know, since I started, you know, I wouldn't in my area let my, you know, charge out front. I mean, she's little, but still I wouldn't let her out front. I wouldn't even let an older child out front by themselves. I think it depends on where you live, but definitely that, you know, that has changed a lot. But there are multiple things things change all the time. I think prior generations definitely had it a little bit easier, because when I was younger, it was like Dr. Spock, and that was it. Like that was the guru on raising your child. And now there are so many. There's this method and this book and this training and how to train your child this way, and how to have the happier child over here, and how to do this. And parents, I think, are just really, really, you know, they're just piled on with so much information that's out there. And then it's also, you know, you have the parent who's posting, you know, that their kid is already sleeping through the night. And there's a lot out there for parents, and it's really hard, versus years ago when it was just your neighbors, and that's who you went and looked to. So things have definitely changed in the years. I mean, for the better, but also sometimes for the worse.
Sure. Which position have you enjoyed most in your career? Working as a nanny or NCS? And did you ever work as both at the same time?
I will say that I think it's the Libra in me that I cannot decide on a position. I like all of my positions for whatever reason in life. They all have helped make me who I am right now. And without each one, I wouldn't be who I am in my career and also personally. So I can't really, you know, each one's has its own pluses and negatives. I mean, it's like traveling to any country. I can't pick one country that I like. I like them all for different reasons. So I like the positions. As far as, I have worked kind of as like an NCS and nanny at the same time. My first position I did, me and the other nanny, as well as the parents, helped take turns with the baby who was born while I was there. And, you know, we would each take turns during nighttime. You know, it was, it was it was 24/7 a lot of times, but we would flop off, you know, who would get up with the baby, who wouldn't get up with the baby. If someone got up with the baby, that person could sleep in. But yeah, that would be the only one that I actually worked as a nanny and NCS, because they had older children as well. And so then we would have to take care of the older children during the day as well. And then make sure all the house was running as well. So, yeah, but I can't just pick one. I have to pick all of them. I think it's the Libra in me. I just can't do it.
I understand as a fellow Libra.
Yes. Oh, good.
Fully understand. All right. Well, I would, first of all, I'd love to say congratulations to your being nominated and chosen as Nanny of the Year from the International Nanny Association for 2019. And then also I recently saw a CNN article on you as well. Yes. So kudos.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I'm still, you know, the Nanny of the Year. I'm still, you know, every time I hear it, it's like, oh my gosh, that was me. But it was an honor. It was truly an honor. And it's nice to be, you know, just like anything, it's nice to be recognized for something that you do and what you're passionate about and what, you know, what your whole life is. So it was a great honor. And so I'm very happy to have joined that family of Nanny of the Years, past Nanny of the Years.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Heidi Joline, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.